Early Learning Board meeting. I'm going to begin as we usually do by asking one of our board members to read the mission for the Early Learning Board to guide our deliberations during this meeting. Justina, are you able to do that for us today, please?
I sure can. The Early Learning Board mission is to support children's academic and lifelong well-being by directing and supporting the EOEL for an effective, coordinated, high-quality early learning system from prenatal to kindergarten entry.
Thank you. We have a new member to welcome, and that is Napua Rosehill, who is Jack Wong's designee and the Kamehameha seat here on the board. And I've asked Napua if she would share with us a little bit about herself and what her position is, so we can begin to get to know her and to hear her voice. Napua, welcome.
Good morning, good afternoon. My name is Napua Rosehill. I am from Hawaii Island, born and raised in Puna, and now I reside at my home in Puna'ewa. I'm a mom of two and a recent grandma, so early learning is extremely dear to my heart. I started my first early learning at Puna'ewa. So I taught there back in 2000, and then eventually I made my way to Kamehameha School. So Hawaiian culture-based education at the earliest learning from Hi'ipepe, from infant and toddler, all the way on up to K-12 is really my passion. I have my master's in education in early learning with an emphasis in 0 to 3. So that is a little bit about me.
Okay. And would you share with us a little bit about your current position with Kamehameha?
So my current position is a strategy consultant for Hi'i'alo. My focus is everything that's early learning that is not considered part of our preschool, nakula kamani.
Oh, okay.
And so what I like to say is everything from twinkle to wrinkle. So I look at things from establishing new preschool seats, land acquisitions, as all the way on up to working with post-secondary institutions to really develop our workforce. How do we provide support as we're building up all these classrooms? How do we fill the kumu? How do we fill those classrooms with kumu? And then I do community partnerships. So really anything outside of our preschool classrooms.
Well, thank you. Sounds like you're pretty busy.
Good work though, it's all good work.
And you can add me to your wrinkle club. I will fit quite nicely. We're delighted to have you and look forward to getting to work with you in the coming times as we continue to do this really important work together. All right, we need to establish a quorum, so I'm going to do a roll call attendance. Justina?
Here.
Erin?
Here.
Okay, Iolani? Megan?
Here.
You? Ben?
Here.
May?
Here.
Peters is here. Napua?
Here.
Mari?
Here. Here.
Melody?
Here.
Dana Luca? I know she's planning to join us. She may not be back in our office yet. So we'll wait for her. Rochelle, I know, is absent today. Steve Schatz. Steve?
Sorry, Bob. Steve will be about 15 minutes late.
Okay, thank you, Kim.
Thank you.
And Keiko Nita for Matt Shin.
Yep, here.
Okay. Because we had a meeting this morning of the Strategic Implementation Subcommittee, we have a lot of people in person today, which is really exciting to see the table much more full than it usually is. My wife would be upset with me, much fuller than it usually is. Excuse me. As usual, this meeting is being recorded. Any votes we take will be done by roll call. and we do have a quorum. All right, there are no special announcements for this meeting at this point, but we do want to move to item number 2. We have 2 sets of minutes to approve that were sent to you in advance. The first set is the August 25th, 22nd special meeting minutes. That's the meeting where we heard the pre-publication RAND report at that particular time. Is there a motion to approve those minutes as presented?
I motion.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I second, Bob.
Thank you. Motion has been made and seconded to approve the August 25th, 2022 special meeting minutes. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, I will do a roll call vote for approval of the minutes as presented. Justina,
Aye.
Aaron,
Aye.
Ilani,
Aye.
Megan,
Aye.
Ben,
Aye.
May,
Aye.
I vote aye. Napua,
Aye.
Mari,
Aye.
Carrie,
Aye.
Melody.
Aye.
Thank you all. The minutes have been approved as presented. We'll now do the second set of minutes, which is for the regular September meeting on September 8th, 2022. The chair will entertain a motion to approve those minutes.
Bob, this is Carrie, so moved.
Thank you, Gary. I was afraid we would be here a good bit of the afternoon. Is there a second?
I'll second.
And Mari second. The motion has been made and seconded to approve the September 8th, 2022 meeting minutes. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, we'll move to a vote. Justina,
Aye.
Aaron,
Aye.
Ilani,
Aye.
Megan,
Aye.
Ben,
Aye.
May,
Aye.
I vote aye. Napua,
Aye.
Mari,
Aye.
Gary,
Aye.
Melody.
Aye.
Thank you all. The September meeting minutes have been approved as presented. All right, the next item on the agenda is the first opportunity in this meeting for public comment, with a reminder that there's a 2-minute time limit per speaker and comments need to be germane to the agenda as presented. Are there any public comments at this point in the meeting? Jordana, anything in the chat? I don't see anything. All right, so there appear to be no public meetings. We'll move to item 4. We have a special presentation to us. Chris Jackson, the Head Start Collaboration Director, is going to introduce our speakers from the Department of Education. Chris, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Mahalo, Bob. Good afternoon, everyone. So I'm very happy to be able to introduce you all to 2 phenomenal people who work with the Department of Education for Homeless Children and Youth program. So I'll introduce Toby first. I first met Toby several years ago when she was still a part-time resource teacher, which was then called the Homeless Concerns Office within the DOE. And since then, now 6 years or so later, she is now called the state coordinator for the Education for Homeless Children and Youth program. During her short tenure, I mean, I'm sure she feels like it's been really long, but during the short tenure, she has really focused a lot on infrastructure development and enhancing the capacity of her office. And I just have to give her credit that, she was able to, within several years ago, to approach the legislature and actually get 15 full-time positions funded to replace the less than 10 part-time positions that were originally in place when she took over. So she's really been able to build the office in terms of capacity and has worked to develop a really close network of liaisons together. They have regular meetings and are doing great work in their communities. And in addition to that, with the recent ARPA funding for homelessness, she was able to create 3 additional positions, a re-engagement navigator position, a transportation navigator position, and an early learning navigator position. And a fun fact, I hope I don't embarrass you, Toby, but last year she was awarded the National Association for Education for Homeless Children and Youth Award as a state coordinator. So we're really so fortunate. Hawaii is so fortunate to have that kind of acknowledgement of the great work that's being done here in Hawaii to support homeless children and youth. In terms of the early learning navigator, we have Lisa Martinez. Lisa, are you going to show your face? Lisa Martinez as well. And she, I think, is in her 3rd year as a community homeless concerns liaison in the, hi, Lisa, in the Campbell Kapolei complex area. And she was recently hired as the new early learning navigator. So she's been really busy trying to make herself available. She's going out and meeting early learning programs and staff so that she can become more familiar with what are the programs, services, and resources out there for families of young children birth to 5 who are experiencing housing instability. So she's very enthusiastic. She wants to learn. She wants to partner with folks, and her whole mission is to try to get more kiddos birth to 5 enrolled in early learning programs and services. So with that, I think those were the things I wanted to share. I'll turn it over to Toby and Lisa to talk a little bit more about the work that their office does. Thanks.
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for having us. And Chris, thanks a million for the introduction. And I'll say publicly, thank you to Lisa for taking on this role as the early learning navigator. She knows how grateful I am to her for her enthusiasm in that role. And it's just wonderful to see it actualized, because we've been talking about this and trying to draw attention to this subgroup, if we can call it that, for many years. And I have Chris Jackson to thank for that, because she's pulled us along and called me every couple of weeks to say, hey, what are you doing with the young ones? Don't forget the young ones. So this is definitely a joint effort, and I'm really glad to be with you for a few minutes today. So I did prepare a few slides because I was asked to share a bit about our program. I didn't make too many, and I'll kind of go through them quickly because you have a full agenda today. But what I tried to do is link to more information on different topics here. So I'll leave these slides with Jordana and she can share them with you. So for example, here, if you click the link on EHCY, which you don't have to do, Jordana, it will take you to our DOE homepage where we've got the forms that we need and information and updates and links to other things. So you can keep going. This just lists all of us. The 2 of us that are here today are highlighted so you can find us easily. And it's true, we went from a team of 1 to a team of 2 for a couple of years, and now there are 6 of us at the state level. And this just, it's an outdated picture, but it just is to illustrate that really the whole program is about the people that work it. The liaisons are on the ground, meeting families, doing outreach, bridging communication between external providers and schools. They're finding lots of young kids, siblings and family members and neighbors of the families that they serve, as well as kids who have left school and may or may not want to re-engage. So we're trying to aim for both ends of that spectrum at this point. Keep moving with a continued focus on the center. This just gives you a brief illustration of how the program works with the child in the middle. The liaisons are in the turquoise circle there with the arrows around it, and they joined, as Chris said, with some thanks to the ledge for recognizing the need for that. And they've been in place for a few years now, about 3 years. The purpose was for them to really engage with the community agencies so that we could find out more about need and also target directly the needs that we were identifying that were outside of our scope when we were strictly focusing on school. You can keep moving. The EHCY is a national program, and it's guided by the McKinney-Vento Act, which has been around since the late 1980s. And the focus really is on educational stability and full participation in school. You can keep moving. I put this in here because it's important to note that the definition of homeless is a little bit different per McKinney-Vento than it is from HUD, in that it includes doubled up, that sharing housing with others due to economic hardship. And that's kind of a confusing issue, comes up a lot for us. And in fact, a lot of the young kids that we identify are in doubled up situations. I won't go into it too much here, but there's a pretty concise one pager that's linked on the bottom of this slide, so you can all have access to that if you're interested. If you can go back for 1 second, really the thrust of it is whether this thing at the top here about lacking a fixed, regular, and adequate primary nighttime residence. And, you know, sometimes we find families, they appear to be living in a fixed and regular place. It's attached to the ground and they go there all the time and have been there for years, but we find out that there are, you know, 12 people sharing a 1-bedroom, or maybe it's a larger house, but there's no running water or electricity where the families stay, or they stay in the garage. So, you know, we do look at a variety of things and make sure that the living is stable and adequate. Okay, you can keep moving. There's a common misconception that when someone's homeless, they can enroll in any school that they want. And in fact, it's really just an expansion of the right. So just like everybody, they have the right to enroll in their home school. That's the school in the area where they reside for them, you know, most of the time. But then they also have the right to stay or return to the school of origin, which is the school they were attending when they lost their housing. And this is, of course, the family's choice. And it's, of course, the decision is made in the best interest of the child. And we will provide support for transportation and other things if school of origin is where they want to remain. Can you keep going? This really just is to emphasize that immediate enrollment is priority. We don't worry about records or paperwork or anything. If somebody shows up at school and says their housing is unstable, we enroll them right away, and then we work with them to get the necessary paperwork. Keep going. We had this, just briefly to give you a picture, we identify kids across the state every year, approximately 3,500. The last couple of years, our counts were a little bit lower, with kids not being in school all the time and full time, but they're spread across the complex areas. And you can see here that our Nanakuli Waianae on Oahu and Pearl City Waipahu are not surprisingly high counts, as is KMR Honolulu district, but we have on Kauai and Maui and Big Island as well. Maui's quite high this year also. Keep going. And this breaks down by the primary nighttime residents. So of course we have the families in shelters. It says here 591 kids. This is from last school year, but you can see the majority are in doubled up situations. And this is true across the nation. So because that definition is different, our liaisons have a hard time connecting a lot of our families to available resources in the housing sector, because they're not eligible necessarily. And there is work on the national level to align those definitions, but until they do, we really have to work and be creative about finding the families and then finding ways to support them that's not disappointing. We can't help them necessarily connect with a housing navigator that's going to result in housing support. So this is a point of frustration. Keep going. You can keep going. As Chris mentioned, we received a lot of money last year, 7 times the normal amount that we're accustomed to in this American Rescue Plan. They distributed over $800 million across the country for the Homeless Children and Youth program. And so we have about $3 million for the next few years. And so we knew right away from having the liaisons on the ground what the trends were in terms of challenges, what were the hardest nuts to crack. And they were in those 3 areas that Chris mentioned: transportation, especially in rural areas, re-engagement of kids who separate from school due to homelessness and then come back and it's maybe close to being too late for them to finish on time, or kids who are at risk of dropping out. And then this 0 to 5 group, which I told you has been on my radar for a long time. We really want to make sure that we know who the kids are. We approximate 3,000 kids also 0 to 5 that are in homeless situations, but we know with a doubled up there, the number's way higher than that. So we really wanted to prioritize this, and that's why we put in the navigator, and Lisa jumped right in. She was doing that work already as a liaison. She does lots of outreach and meets with families at shelters, on the streets and beaches. She can tell you more about that if you have questions. But, you know, while our goal is to keep kids in school and get them to graduation, and preschool birth to 5 sounds far away from that, I know that the rest of you know that it's not far, and how important those programs are. And how challenging some of how challenged some of our families are to access those, given the barriers that they face due to their housing. So you can keep moving. Why 0 to 5? I don't have to read this to you. You all know, but again, it's about the barriers that they face to access some of our really strong early childhood programming. And our counts are low, while Head Start and EOEL are tasked with reaching out to and serving families in challenging economic situations. Our numbers are really low for a variety of reasons. And so we're here to join hands with everybody involved and really see what we can do to get more kids enrolled. Keep moving. I mentioned our outreach. This was something that we planned to do before COVID, really for the re-engagement and identification of young kids during the school day and so forth. But then COVID hit right as we were going to launch. And so our outreach took a different kind of a turn, but we're really proud of this program, and happy to be making friends and colleagues and connections in the communities. And Lisa can tell you that when the bus pulls up, the kids are really happy to see that. And that makes me really happy, because it does build some trusting relationships with families, either of families that are already enrolled in school or the ones with the little ones who are coming up soon. And if we have these well-established relationships, I think it results in a better transition to school. And I think this is our last slide. This is my call to action. I put shamelessly in every call that that I make and meeting that I attend. Purposity is a national resource. It's purpose and generosity mashed together in one word, a portmanteau, to help us to meet needs in real time. So this does not have to be limited to kids in unstable housing, though the liaisons are the organizers. We find out about needs that kids have. Anybody who knows of a need, they can send them to the liaison, who posts them on Purposity, and you can access through an app, and follow Hawaii Public Schools, or now they're just transitioning to a web-based platform, which makes it a little bit easier. And it's an anonymous donation. All you do is put in your payment information, and you can meet a specific need. Like the other day, I bought jeans for a girl on Kauai who's preparing for winter. So all I had to do is say I wanted to buy those jeans, and put in my payment information, and the jeans will be sent. She should get them any day. So please check out Purposity and share the word within your personal and professional networks, because we can really meet a lot of needs right away, and also to help people who are inclined to help do so in a way that we know is meaningful. And that's all from me. As I mentioned already, I'm thrilled to introduce Lisa to all of you, and we have left a few minutes at the end in case you have questions or suggestions or comments or anything to share with us. Lisa.
Anyone have comment? Lisa, are you going to add anything?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that, please?
I just wanted to know if you would like to say a few things yourself.
Oh, sure. So again, I think Chris and Toby both did a really good job of introducing who I am and what I'm currently doing. And, you know, moving forward, if you see there's anywhere that we could intersect within our work, I'm more than happy to do that. And I would love it if, you know, you included me in any of those types of things. I think the more that we can collaborate and, you know, build those bridges, the better off we're going to be to get our 0 to 5 population in unstable housing into early childhood services. So I'm very open to any new ideas or old ideas or anything like that So please feel free to reach out to me, and I'm excited to be here. And I look forward to working with anybody who would like to. And if anybody has questions, please feel free to reach out if you need clarification or anything on it. Anything that Toby talks about. As she mentioned, I've been a liaison for the last couple of school years and currently still doing that while we're transitioning somebody into the new role. So again, happy to answer any types of questions or give clarification as needed.
Mari has a question.
Yes.
Okay.
I noticed that you use the word navigator for 3 leaders there. And then, will you teach me a little bit more about that, because that is kind of new to me too. How did you choose the navigator? Is it different from coordinator? Is it different from some other names that we oftentimes hear?
Sure, that's a great question, actually. I chose the navigator, and then it's funny because it's coming up in a lot of the sectors. And I think it's because there are so many, I don't want to call them dead ends, but so many roads we've gone down before that seem dead on the end of them, or they turn into something that doesn't pan out, or there's a missing piece or something. And so I think I chose navigator initially because these are 3 areas that have given us some challenges over the past few years. And while we know there's a lot of good stuff in there, we need a dedicated person to navigate the road to get us to where we want to go. So that's the origin of that. But as it turns out, like I said, it's popping up all over the place, because I think this is true. We're all trying to navigate new inroads, make new inroads in areas. And so we need curious people that are willing to go forward and fall flat and get back up and keep going.
Thank you.
Justina.
Hi there. Lisa, I was hoping, could you actually share a little bit about how you do your work? Like, are you interfacing directly with families and then having, connecting them with some of the early childhood programs they might qualify for? Just talk about a little bit. And then I had curiosity about that circle image you were showing, Toby, because there was 2 positions that seem maybe related, but I don't understand how they work. One was a homeless connect coordinator and one was a community homeless connect coordinator, something like that. I might not have the terms right, but how are they different? And then how do they connect with the community folks? Thank you.
Lisa, you want to answer the first set of questions, and then I can take the second one if you'd like.
Sure. So for me currently, I go out and host outreach events. So being that I am still the temporary liaison for the Campbell Coupley Complex area, I often go out to the shelter in Barbers Point and hold different types of outreach events, primarily for the kindergarten to 12th grade population, but there's always siblings and I invite everybody. So I've been identifying students that way and then connecting them with resources that are available in their area. They do have the small preschool on site there that they can receive services, but it's only 2 days a week. So then I also connect them with information like HCAP, or depending on their age, or if I see that they have any kind of needs for early intervention services, getting them connected with that, or with the EOEL program. I've printed out flyers and different things. So I always try to give all of that information and start building trust and rapport with families. And then I also provide my contact information to get those referrals in for those families. And then the second way that we identify students as liaisons are through our McKinney Dental forms. So those are given to every single student. And there's a section on that form that lists any other siblings that may be in the home. So 0 to 5 age range. And then we can connect those families with services as well, depending on where they're residing and whatnot. So we as a team are working, I'm implementing some different strategies to have the liaisons refer to HCAP services, refer to EOEL, and then have a tracking form so they know that they have referred these students to services, so they're not falling through the cracks or anything like that. So those are the 2 main ways as we as liaisons and myself do identify students in unstable housing situations in this population.
Justina, did that answer your question? Okay, great. And then I'll take the second one quickly. So you're right, that was a pretty observant in that couple seconds that slide was up there, the 2 circles. And Chris had mentioned that before we got the 15 full-time positions from the ledge, there were part-time people. And in some of the complex areas, especially the more populated ones, we retain those part-time people, and they act more like a school liaison. So they do less of the connecting with community agencies and more making sure that families receive the forms, that they have uniforms, that transportation is connected. They're 17-hour people. And actually we went from having like 12 of them to now there are 4. So that's kind of an old graphic, but you caught it. Yeah.
Chris has a comment to make, but Chris, before you do, if I may, I want to double check something. Toby, did I understand correctly that you said you think you're reaching about 10% of children in this age range? Is that accurate?
You know, that's our estimate, and Chris can speak to that a little bit more. It's hard to know for a variety of reasons. You know, we know how many kids that we get in our special ed school programs. We know that for sure because they're entered in, and we can get a count from Head Start, and we can get a count from EOEL, but we don't really know the full number of kids 0 to 5 that are homeless. We know the ones that are in HMIS. You know, we get that through Partners in Care. That's the homeless management information system. But again, those are only the families who are eligible for support under HUD. So it's a hard number for us to get our hands on, you know, it's pretty slippery. But hopefully the more we all work together, the better we're going to be able to get at some baseline. And that's one of the goals this year, is to get some baseline, Lisa, to get her hands on some, accurate or not, so that we can at least keep moving.
Thank you for clarifying that.
Your question, sure.
Chris, you wanted to add something?
Yeah, my comment was that, you know, right now, it's been a bit of a challenge to try to find different opportunities to enroll kiddos birth to 5 into our early learning system. Right now, Head Start, Early Head Start, and EOEL, as well as the Early Intervention Program and the McV Home Visiting Program, are primarily the only ones that are doing outreach and actually engaging little guys who are experiencing homelessness and their families. The Hawaii Head Start Association and EOAL both have separate MOUs with Toby's shop to really try to support increased enrollment of kiddos into our programs, because we do have that. In Head Start's case, it's one of our categorically eligible areas. And so we are provided sort of it's not a mandate, but it really is a high priority for us to enroll more kids into our programs. But again, with Lisa now being in this new position, and we're trying to introduce her to more folks, we're hoping that there will be more community preschools who will be interested in serving kids, more family childcare home providers who might be interested in taking in some of these kids into their care. And certainly FCILs, we know that Kapa'alana, Partners in Development, is the other program that totally works with our homeless families on the West Side. So, you know, it's still very limited in terms of the opportunities to connect kiddos with early learning programs, but we're hoping now with this new position and Toby's continued support that we can get more kids enrolled. So just wanted to make that comment. Thanks.
Thank you, Chris. Anyone else have any questions for Lisa or Toby, or comments tonight?
I have a little comment.
Okay, Mari?
You know, did you reach out to the OBGYN people who have the prenatal mom? You know, mom who are pregnant. So they're gonna be born. And then if the mom has a housing issues, the kid's gonna have a housing issues. So I'm just curious if you're able to reach out, because that's probably the earliest to catch the kids.
Right. So historically, that hasn't been a target group because we were focusing only on the kids that were enrolled in school or those that we knew of as siblings. But again, now that we have expanded capacity with a person in that role to navigate just this age group, yes, we are, that is on our radar to connect with the community clinics. We have some of those leads through the early intervention avenue, but there's a lot more to explore. So thank you for bringing that up. We're connected also with a little bit with the medical street outreach. So occasionally we do find out about people who either just gave birth or are about to give birth. And we have found school age siblings of these little ones that way, and have also tried to connect families and those birth mothers with other resources.
Thank you.
Well, I want to thank you both for coming to share this program with us today. I think we're all a bit in awe at the challenges we're facing, but very happy to see that the youngest sector are being included in your efforts to meet their needs as well. And we will publicize as best we can the Perposity app and let people know about it, if I can ever say it correctly. That's a hard word to say. But we will,
EHCY, is that what you're trying to say?
yes.
We just say the letters. EHCY, yeah. So that's not too hard. Thank you.
But thank you for coming and sharing with us today. And we would appreciate knowing at any point that you see ways we can intersect and be supportive to share them with our community here.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for holding it up for the young ones. And we feel the same way. Anything that you come up with as a group where we can somehow be supportive, we are here.
Thank you for having us.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Mahalo. Okay. And thank you, Chris, for making the connection for us so that we could learn more about this Education for Homeless Children and Youth Program Office and how it functions. Item number 5 on the agenda is the Executive Office on Early Learning Updates. And Yuko, I'll turn it over to you and your staff.
Thank you so much. So I just wanted to first start off by saying thank you to Toby and Lisa for presenting that. I'm new into this role, but I'm familiar with some of your work in my former role, but I would love to have a conversation with you so we can figure out how we can continue to work together. I know we've got our MOA together, but I'd like to also learn more about your work. So I look forward to that, and I shot you an email already. So we're going to go through our UEL office updates. And so next slide, Jordana. Should I just read it so you don't have to run through it? Yes, I'll just read it. So for our legislative updates, so in the next coming months, we're going to be meeting with the governor's office to discuss our proposals and our fiscal requests. And so we'll keep the board updated. For our EOEL public pre-K, there is the national conference that's going to be coming up, and our own Robin Chun from UH Hawaii at Manoa is going to be a presenter. Our public pre-K program just completed our submission of our data for the NEAR research study, and we will see the results published next year in March. And we are currently collecting Q1 application and enrollment data from our DOE schools. Next. Yeah, I can just skip that. Maybe this one first, and I'll do mine first. And then, okay, first. Okay, so for PDGB 5 grant, so on October 3rd, we started to convene a group of state agencies who are interested. And so we've got the grant leads for this current application of PDGB 5 will be EOEL in partnership with P20. The PI and the fiscal agent will be P20. And the reason for that is Right now, EOEL is still in process of creating our MOA with the Department of Education to be able to hold federal grants in our office. Recording it. We also have our core team members. You can see those folks here. We have representation from EOEL, ELB, P20, DHS, DOH, Hawaii DOE, charter schools, and of course the university system. This year's grant application has 6 major activities. You can see them right here on the screen. When you look at the point allocation, huge points are allocated towards workforce. And so that's going to be a big part of our application. There are also some bonus options that we will be taking a look at, which include coordinated application eligibility and enrollment for families, improving workforce compensation, and access to inclusive settings. And so we had one meeting on the 6th. We're going to have another meeting on the 14th, and the PDG grant submission is due on November 7th. So we are working quickly. Okay, next slide. We're back to Olympics PDG 5.
Oh, it's okay. I just want to verbally share what you find in what got sent is a little bit different. So we still have the annual convening, the dates are still the same. That's not changed. I just wanted to share that for the ongoing work, the system visualization workshops are completed and the team has completed all 4 workshops and not made like the update said. And we need to talk, the team needs to talk about how to continue next steps to sustain the conversation, or what are the lessons learned that we can get from the workshop so that we can incorporate it into our work overall.
Okay, next slide. Grace?
Thanks, Yuko. So actually this insertion was from the previous month. So I'm going to report orally the October updates. And this information will then be shared in the minutes for today's meeting. So for October updates, a meet and greet between the EOEL director, Yuko, and the Office of Head Start Region 9 leadership team was held on September 29th, coordinated by the collab director. And this was an opportunity for the Region 9 staff to meet Yuko, to learn about her goals for the office, and priorities for Hawaii's early care and education system, as well as to provide her with some information about how Region 9 supports Hawaii Head Start and Early Head Start programs, as well as the collab office. The group agreed that we would possibly have quarterly meetings to continue to exchange ideas, which would be beneficial to align our efforts between Hawaii and Region 9. And coincidentally, we're hoping to have another meeting at the end of November, so sooner than quarterly. The next quarterly Head Start Association of Hawaii board meeting will be held on October 18th as part of the upcoming 2022 Family Engagement and Cultural Responsiveness Conference in Kailua, Kona. And at that time, the National Head Start Association will be providing an early Head Start messaging training for our Head Start Association board and partner advocates. And the training will help showcase the use of Early Head Start Rising Toolkit to discuss key audiences and targeted messages for Early Head Start advocacy. So we are hoping to learn more about how best to elevate Early Head Start as well as infant toddler issues in Hawaii with Hawaii folks after this training. A new and improved Head Start referral app is now available to McKinney-Vento School District liaisons, as well as to Head Start family support workers, to expedite referrals to Head Start and Early Head Start programs of children birth to 5 experiencing homelessness. Piloting of the referral app, which was a tool developed between the National Head Start Association and Schoolhouse Connection, occurred in several states this past year to assess its usability. And a newly modified app is now being rolled out in states through invitations to participate in training and technical assistance sessions with Schoolhouse Connection. So for Hawaii, we're going to be taking advantage of one of the office hours that the Education for Homeless Children and Youth program has on October 25th to include McKinney-Vento liaisons as well as our Head Start folks to hear more about this new app and how we can coordinate better for more timely and effective referrals. There have been recent webinars by both the National Head Start Association as well as the Office of Head Start, focused on full enrollment because, as you've heard us mention before, starting September of this year, Head Start programs are required to go back to meeting full enrollment. There was a waiver to more flexibility earlier on during the pandemic, but now Office of Head Start is wanting everyone to go back to full enrollment. So there's been a lot of information memoranda about full enrollment, child health and safety, as well as how to spend down the buckets of COVID funding that have come down to different Head Start programs. And in addition to the above mentioned activities, October is also Head Start Awareness Month. So we would like you to just join our Head Start community in celebrating over 55 years of a comprehensive child development and multi-generational service delivery approach provided to over 1 million children ages birth to 5 and their families each year, connecting them to early learning experiences and critical community resources that help both our children and their families succeed and thrive. So happy to take any questions if there are any. Mahalo.
Thank you, Chris. So I just want to give an update on things that are happening internally in our EOEL office. So starting this month, we started to have one-to-one meetings, or I started to have one-to-one meetings with different staff members to really take a look at position descriptions and try to look at our organization of our office to ensure that we are organized internally to make the best use of the people and our funding. And so that's begun right now in the month of October. Next slide. We're in the middle of still our staff selection. So we had a workforce development position, which was posted. It closed on October 4th. There are some applicants there, and we're in the process of scheduling interviews. We posted a secretary position, which closed just a couple days ago on the 10th, a few days ago on the 10th. We already interviewed for the administrative services assistant, business manager, and a communication specialist. We're going through some reviews of references right now and taking a look at additional documents which are submitted for some of the positions, and we will be making a decision soon on those 3 positions. Additionally, our current institutional analyst, Kelly, moving on to P20, and so we're going to be reviewing that position description of the institutional analyst to, number one, ensure that it meets the work which we hope to accomplish in the office. It was previously under the pre-K organizational part of EOEL, and we're going to be moving it over to support the entire office. So really taking a look at that position description to ensure that it meets the needs of our whole office. Next. Our EOEL systems building team is still in the process of creating our action plan for our office. So these are areas in which EOEL can take the lead to support the system in relationship to our statute, our express goals to the board, and other pressing or pertinent items such as MOAs and MOUs with other individual entities. When we are finished, we will bring it through subcommittees and then hopefully present it to the board soon. I would like this soon. It's going to be hopefully by December that we'll have it ready for your review and feedback. But we also did take into consideration the feedback which was offered by the board when I had asked for feedback at that time. Next. I wanted to share in terms of advocacy and communication on behalf of EOEL, but not the board yet, because you're going to be having a presentation today. But EOEL did support the kindergarten entry assessment, which was selected by the Department of Education. However, we wanted to also express to them in our letter that we're thankful that we wanted them to take into consideration our Hawaiian medium education, and also ensure that there's no punitive consequences for young children and their families or early learning programs and services with any relation to this kindergarten entry assessment. Next. I also wanted to share that there are some ongoing community meetings, and the driving force is the School Facilities Authority and the $200 million which are allocated for funding. And so a lot of the people who are at the table are the School Facilities Authority, the Department of Education, Public Charter Schools, EOEL, Department of Human Services. And while we know that facilities need people, I think because moving the school facilities authority along is such a huge effort, there's been a lot of focus on that. EOEL does play a pretty important role in being able to share with the greater community where are our areas of need, where do schools exist, and also providing any other information that's pertinent to their decision making. I know that soon we're going to be looping in the county coordinators and the University of Hawaii system into these conversations, because we know that we need context from each county, and we also need to take a strong look at the workforce to fill these spaces which are going to be built. Next. And speaking of spaces, I just want to share a few highlights from the Association for Learning Environments Early Childhood Education Conference, which I attended in Chicago, along with the School Facilities Authority, the executive director, and some members of the board, their board. Next. Some exciting things that I saw as trends. So there are 23 states which are represented there, and there's a big emphasis on what they call biophilia, which is our relationship to nature and environment. And so they were highlighting a few spaces. This is just one of them, where they're really infusing nature and the outdoors into a space. And this space was a converted, abandoned, I think it was a grocery store. And so they're talking about how can we repurpose vacant spaces for benefit of children. Next slide. They were also talking about equitable play. And so this is a space, these are a couple of these are all highlighted from Kansas, but really talking about equity. So how when you think about it and you think about all the play structures which we have, what kind of access and who has access to be able to play in those spaces. And so there's a big emphasis on equitable play. Next. Another emphasis area was on agency. So how do we build physical or academic agency in our children? And I just wanted to highlight this. This is at an early learning center, but you can see the small little blue door. And so they said it's so, children can choose which door they want to enter through. It's their size, they can open it. It's not a big, heavy door, but I thought that this is a pretty neat idea that they're even thinking down to door sizes and giving children the choice of how they want to enter a space which actually belongs to them. Next slide. And this is oh shucks, it's locking it up on the screen, but I'll send it to people in the chat. So there's a YouTube link to this space that they shared, and it's called Britain Infant Development Center. And this space has been in operation for quite some time. It's a long time, and I'll send you the link to the YouTube video just so you can kind of see the development center. But it's a space which was created for children who have special needs, so that they can interact and move around freely and receive all of that kind of stimulation that's good for young children in an environment which helps them navigate their world. And it was pretty inspiring, and their facility is huge. And I was just thinking, wouldn't it be so cool if we had something like that for our kids too? Next slide. So next week, our charter schools and ELB and Department of Education are going to be going to the National P3 conference. And basically, you can see that it's bridging early childhood education and pre-K-12 systems. And so how are we all coordinated? And next slide. And the National P3 Center has a framework, and you can see these 8 different framework buckets which they have. And so these are things that we're going to be dialoguing and discussing. So again, with new leadership in EOEL and the Hawaii Department of Education, and relatively new in the Hawaii Public Charter Schools. How do we help to look at our P3 continuum and transitions and I guess child development from the P all the way through the 3. Next slide. I think that's it, right? that's it. So thank you.
Any questions or comments for Yuko and her team? Not seeing any Yuko, so thank you for catching us up. You're clearly making lots of connections and busily engaged, and do let us know if with the PGGB5 grant, if the board can be of any assistance as you go through that process, because I know that you're working in a really tight time frame.
Yes.
All right. The next item on the agenda is a section on Act 46 and Act 210. We're going to take a look at the KEA and where that stands as one of the elements included within Act 46 and 210, and as well as an update on the ELB provider engagement meeting. And then finally, some conversation around the roadmap work that's being done by the Strategic Implementation Subcommittee under the guidance of Ben and with the work of Lane. So we're fortunate today to have Dr. Lauren Podesky, who is the Hawaii Department of Education Early Learning Specialist with us, to share with us information on the KEA and where it stands and the recent decision by one of the board committees, I believe, correct, Lauren? So would you be willing to come up and be at the table with us? No. Yeah.
Thank you for letting me be here today. I did actually prepare some slides and I can share my screen. So my goal for today is just to review some decisions that have been made regarding the KEA, and then hopefully make plenty of time for questions and next steps and some conversation about how the Department of Education is going to be moving forward in the process. We are all really well familiar with Act 210, but I always like to highlight some of the key requirements that were placed upon the department in particular in locating a tool. So we are keeping in mind as well that we are looking for a tool that can be reasonably administered within the first 30 days of each child's entry into kindergarten, as well as a tool that can meet that addition of it being a uniform and statewide assessment, while also being able to be conducted in English or Hawaiian, as well as covering the essential domains of school readiness that were outlined through the National Research Council reports, and then meet the need of being also valid and reliable. And then finally, actually being adopted by the Board of Education, which has recently occurred, but with some caveats. And our first implementation will be July 1st of 2023, but again, with very particular caveats that I'm going to discuss today. We wanted to highlight some of the benefits of administering a KEA because they help us also to understand some of our goals with the assessment. Because one choice is to administer an assessment in order to be in compliance, whereas what our office would like to accomplish is actually to promote developmentally appropriate practices and engage the kindergarten space as one that promotes holistic child development academically and socially and physically in a safe and supportive community, while also giving us information to provide the instruction that children need in order to thrive, whether that's in an academic way or a physical or a social way. This developmental tool that we're going to propose here is one that can provide teachers with that information and allow us to then know the types of professional development and coaching and other supports that our contexts need to accomplish this larger vision, of a kindergarten that is developmentally appropriate and safe learning space for our students. So about our selection process, we found ourselves quite limited in terms of the tool options, particularly with the updates in 210. Kindergarten entry assessments are often conducted at a state level, and so the validity and reliability piece wasn't always present in the ways that were interpreted through the act. So we actually only located 2 tools that met all 5 of those domains and had also been statistically validated in that way. And we had some procurement processes that made the time take quite a bit longer than we had anticipated. But ultimately, we did decide to try and contract with the Johns Hopkins University. Their tool is called Ready for Kindergarten. We're referring to it still as a kindergarten entry assessment. And the tool is one that's in use in multiple states and is one that is actually quite affordable compared with the other option that we were in consideration of. So this is the tool that we took to the Board of Education. And the Board of Education made multiple decisions regarding this tool and gave us further tasks in order to fully meet the requirements of the dual language system in particular. So one thing to note is that they did approve using the Johns Hopkins University KEA, but for the English medium schools. And directly related to that, we have been asked to return to the board with a plan and a process amongst key stakeholders between OSID, my office, as well as the Office of Hawaiian Education and our Kaiapuni stakeholders for a plan for appropriately developing a Hawaiian language KEA for the Hawaiian medium schools. The board indicated during that meeting that they would advocate for a 1-year delay of implementation in the Kaiapuni schools because we know that the development of a Hawaiian language assessment, as we have experienced previously with Ka'eo, is going to be time intensive, and we need to appropriately budget for that, as it were. We also are exploring options because we know in Act 210, there are different specifications around the charter schools versus the DOE schools. And so we are still working across our offices to make those final decisions about what this upcoming year will look like. But again, the board's ideal recommendation is to advocate for that 1-year delay. That final decision will occur at a later date, likely this board meeting on December 15th, when we can get more information about how to move that forward. But in that process, we're also convening multiple stakeholder groups across multiple offices to talk very deeply about the implications for the Hawaiian language KEA and how to do that in ways that actually reflect Kaiapuni values and the ways of schooling for those students. Some quick information regarding the Johns Hopkins tool, emphasizing again that it is for the English medium schools. It is grounded in what they call their common language standards. And I bring those forth now because I want to emphasize that they're not instructional standards and they're not academic standards. I see them from an early childhood perspective as developmental milestones that we're assessing children for in a variety of capacities to have better understanding of where to start with every child in a variety of domains. So the tool is built out with those common language standards. And then they have items distributed across observational as well as direct performance items. And teachers have quite a bit of agency and autonomy in their decisions for structuring the assessment process. So they can choose to group items with quite a bit of agency. And they also have a pyramid model for understanding how to accommodate items for students that have disabilities, for example, or students that are learning the language of instruction as a new language. So the teachers themselves have to be extensively trained in that process, which is also a huge part of the work that we're going to be doing in the department. Something that is very appealing for us and ideally is going to be empowering for families is that they will receive a full holistic report about their child. And this data is pretty much almost immediately available. So we're not going to collect this data and have to wait for it to come back to us. The teachers are able to enter data. Principals are able to enter data within their dashboard framework, and then it's immediately accessible for the teacher because its ultimate purpose is to empower the teacher to communicate about the children in ways that are respectful, and then also able to change their instruction as need be, provide interventions, enrichments, and generalize their support across all the students. So that in particular is very empowering and it's different from a lot of the data that we currently collect. The immediacy of access is also impactful because when we go through this first implementation cycle, we'll be able to pretty quickly assess baseline what we found out and actually develop ideally a professional support network based on our students' needs. With that in mind, our implementation timeline is probably tighter than we had initially expected. It's rather unusual to have to collect board adoption in order to administer an assessment. So that has been a large part of our process, as well as a CPO exemption. So those processes are ongoing. And then what we'll be doing over the course of this year is the technological integration and ordering. And then simultaneously, we'll be given a process of working with local stakeholders around the KEA tool that's will be most appropriate for KSP. And then in the spring, we will conduct a large-scale kindergarten teacher training with a first iteration of implementation in the fall of 2023. So throughout all of that, our job is to continue to communicate great so that everybody is really aware of where we are and where we're going with the tool, particularly as it pertains to Little Hawaii and our Kaiapuni system. So as I take questions for consideration, please do let me know if you'd like me to go back to a particular slide, or if there's other information I can provide within the visuals as I'm also sharing.
Lauren, did you, and I may have just not been listening carefully and I apologize, did you share who was involved in arriving at the Johns Hopkins?
Oh, sure. So we convened representatives from our Office of Special Education, English learner. Initially, in some of the first work groups, we also worked with representatives from the Office of Hawaiian Education. We had members from our early learning community as well. And those stakeholder groups were analyzing what it meant to meet the domains and the types of tools that would be most appropriate to actually accomplish that goal. And then they also referenced the NEAR reports around an early environmental, or excuse me, SELO. They referenced the SELO report for the environmental scan for KEAs, and they contracted with Dr. Gigi Weisenfeld to also examine that report and make some recommendations based on state demographics, appropriateness of the tool.
Thank you. All right, Lauren is available for questions from members of the board. Carrie? Sorry.
Yeah, aloha. Lauren, thank you so much for this presentation. It was really helpful, and this is something we've wanted for a very, very long time. So it's exciting to see it coming to fruition, and I'm really happy that it's in both Amalela Hawaii and English. I just have a general question about how the Department of Education and the Executive Office of Early Learning and partners are thinking about how this could be used to inform early childhood programs, if at all.
Our thinking right now first is in our office to target our kindergarten teachers to respond to the data and embody what they truly are, which is early childhood educators. That is a gap that we're seeing systemically that we would like to be able to address with professional development and coaching. And then we have data reporting responsibilities to multiple entities within 210. And we see that as an iterative and collaborative process. So we certainly, as we share the data externally, want to work with our early childhood partners to make decisions about what the data does or does not tell us and how to interpret it appropriately so that we can avoid negative interpretations that are completely unintended. But then also be able to collaborate on areas where we can all enrich one another's work.
Great, thank you.
Any other questions that members have?
Justina, what's your hand?
I'm sorry, who?
Justina.
Justina?
Thank you. Thank you, Lauren. And it's exciting to see how far you guys have gone through this process. I had a kind of a follow-on. I'm going to reverse my order because I had two questions, but one relates to what Carrie was asking and what you were sharing about the data. Could you give us a sense of like how the curriculum and instruction branch is working with the data I think this is the right way to say it, the data governance and analyst branch on like how this data might begin to be available for inquiries or things that let us look at the data at a at the broader level that's not identifiable, but we could pull that data if needed. And then maybe, I don't know if this is an easier question, but I was trying to understand from the implementation timeline, it didn't look like it was necessarily going to be piloted or phased in. I saw the word of training for all kindergarten teachers. So is the thinking that actually it would just launch in 2023, or is there sort of a pilot year with a smaller subset of KEAs happening in kindergarten classrooms?
So I'll answer the second question first. For the English medium schools, and really actually for all schools in 210, it says July 1, 2023. We feel like we're going to have better information about making an appropriate plan for the Kaipuni context, given the board directive to actually develop a tool for their contexts. So I do not have a firm timeline for those schools, but the implementation plan, for better or worse, is 210 gave us until 2023. So our English medium schools will be implementing at that time. And then your first question was about the use of the data relative to data and governance. So the dashboards that will be available for the teachers will also be integrated into our data system that already exists in Lake Hulia. So the specificity of what that will look like will be really interesting because the data reports a holistic developmental overall picture, but then it gives domain specific scores. So I don't have a immediate answer in terms of what it will look like visually in Lake Hulia, but what the long-term vision is to be able to disaggregate and evaluate that data in the same way that we collect all the other assessment pieces. The closest parallel in terms of assessment appearance, I feel, would probably be the panorama social emotional learning survey, because it has those multiple items and can give a child multiple scores, even though it's one assessment piece. So it'll be available in the same way, however, that all of our other data pieces are available.
So, and yeah, that was part of my question, is just that we could make it some kind of data inquiry in the first year, but still to be determined what that might look like.
Yes, definitely will be able to do so, yeah.
Lauren, I had another question, and that is, will there be any effort to communicate this with the private sector, what the content, for example, of the Johns Hopkins assessment is, so that they have some familiarity with what the KEA is going to be measuring?
Yeah, so part of that is what I call the Lauren tour. You're a stop on my tour. Thank you for having me. But as we are actually able to name the tool now, what I'll be doing first is going back to all the other areas in which I represent early childhood at the DOE, sharing the name of the tool as we have the actual items in front of us and can legally share through our contract. Then we'll also be sharing those out so that we have a strong sense of what they look like. A question I've gotten in a lot of different contexts is how well it aligns, for example, with TS Gold. And even before I could name the tool, I was able to confidently say that it aligns very well. They cross-inform one another. So I don't feel like folks in the private sector, and I do communicate this, I don't feel like they need to change their current assessment landscape in order to somehow meet the KEA's needs. They assess the same content, but in ways that maybe are more specifically guided for kindergarten in the DOE sector. But they don't need to feel like the data that they're already collecting and sharing out is going to be misaligned with the data that we will be.
Thank you.
I have a, just, I guess it's more, I'm just curious about, stakeholder groups are included. What was there input from families or from teachers that would be in this?
Teachers, yes. I was not here when they convened those original stakeholder groups, so I can't confirm or disconfirm families. I have to go back and look, but I can follow up and definitely let you know that. Teachers were included, relatively small group, to be transparent. Overall, as we have been procuring the tool as well, we have also provided multiple leadership explanations that in X amount of time, this is going to be procured. This is going to occur in school settings. And so there has been leadership down communication, but we're definitely now in the place where that communication is also going to start in specific school sites in terms of implementation.
And then I guess I would just also use this opportunity to say, like, I think you're aware, but I do think that it is a misfit for the KEA to have assessing Hawaii programs. Hawaii Medium providers did provide testimony to the board that actually changed, maybe not to develop something necessarily, but it just doesn't align with the strategies.
Any other questions or comments to you?
May have a question,
May?
but I have, sorry, before me, I had a couple people ask if Leilani could repeat her comments.
Sorry about that, guys. I was just saying, first I wanted to know if families were included and teachers included in the stakeholder groups. And then second, I was just making a comment that I know a lot of Hawaii Medium providers are requesting that there be an exemption similar to what is in the charter side for Kaiapuni schools, because the KEA assessments, regardless of the language that it is administered in, really won't provide helpful results for teachers in the classroom if it's standardized.
I do know that I will absolutely take that same communication back to my office. We will bring that up as we move forward as well. So I'm not just hearing that. I will take that back and continue to do so.
All right, and May?
Thank you. I just want to ask if the KEA results would be shared with parents, or it's just solely for teachers to learn and grasp about their student.
Definitely shared with parents. The purpose, besides the instructional and creating a classroom climate and all of those important work pieces, it is also to communicate with families. There's a whole segment of the training that is about how to communicate this data productively and respectfully, with families, which was a really selling point for me, because we know that data can be used in ways that are not productive for family communication. Particularly, here's a report, sending it away. So teachers are taught to actually deconstruct data with families and to ideally have it in a shared communicational space, face to face, to communicate the data about their students. Otherwise, it's not as meaningful for families. And we don't want to assume that they don't understand the data, but rather we don't want them to assume that the data is going to be used to negatively label or position their child. Because it's a developmental screener as well, it can't do that. It can't function that way. So it doesn't assign like a color or a label to a particular child. It's information in terms of developmental processes up to kindergarten. And so to alleviate concerns in the field too around that, it's very important to us that it can't be used in those ways. It wasn't designed or validated to do so. And so its purpose really is limited to what we know and can do and how we socialize and move and operate as a person in kindergarten. And then we go forth and teach.
Thank you.
Am I correct in interpreting it that it will be used to set goals for children?
I think that would be an appropriate interpretation, yes. It's not going to be you must submit your goals to the department about each child, but that is a major part of the preparation in terms of data analysis, is being able to set goals for students that match what they need, as well as to also communicate that again to families.
Thank you.
I'm a little curious. So after you do this and you start restructure the instruction and do it, how are you going to see how you're getting the result of it or the follow-up?
Right. So because it's an entry screener, it's not a multiple, so it's not quite the same as TS Gold in that way. Currently, the screeners that students would then take in winter as well as spring would be the ones that are already in place currently. So the existing literacy and math screeners in the school as well as the panorama. So the alignment is something that we're still going to have to explore, particularly this first year. That will be a data question for us is, are we able to collect the data that we need after we do this first assessment to be able to see if students have developed? And if not, what do we need to do as a department to make sure that we are collecting that data?
Erin, you get the last question.
Thank you for your presentation. This was really helpful. I had a question related to your most recent comment about it being a developmental screener. And I was just curious if there's any connection then to the special education evaluation or assessment process. Is that going to be tied somehow? And sorry, I'm going to sneak in another question, which is, I just wanted to clarify if there is going to be there will be communication, I think I heard you say, to the early education field or early childhood arena regarding results, so that the early education arena can then kind of support this going forward. So kind of two questions, sorry.
No, absolutely. So the first question, it was not researched, written, or validated to identify or even provide information leaning toward a disability diagnosis. So we are going to absolutely defer to the special education specialists in terms of whether or not they view it as an appropriate data point to inform that special education process. When we finalize the procurement, then our special education specialists will be able to access the entire tool, and we will be meeting with them continuously. But from the outset, it wasn't designed to make that kind of inference about a child. And on its own, it absolutely would not be an appropriate tool to do so, and would not be reliable or valid in terms of saying maybe a child has X or Y. That's not its intent. It could potentially be a data point in an overall holistic picture of a child, but it certainly is not valid or reliable for disability diagnosis. And then the second question. I don't remember what it was. Oh, we will communicate the data. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Thank you so much.
All right, Lauren, I think you've been on the hot seat enough. Thank you so much for coming and sharing with us today. And this is part of the whole package of the implementation efforts around Act 46 and 210. So we're going to move now to another segment which EOEL has been conducting, which are provider engagement sessions. And I'm going to ask Jordana and Alohi if they would come and share a summary of what they've discovered and how this summary information might be used. Yeah.
Okay, hello everyone. So Alohi just handed out a handout that summarizes some of the feedback that we'll be presenting in a little bit more detail. It is a 2-pager, so we'll walk folks through the first and second page. I will also be emailing it to Bob, and Bob can disseminate it to the board members that are not here today. So don't worry, you folks will get an electronic copy of this as well. Okay, so I want to set a little bit of context and just sort of explain sort of why we did these engagements, what the purpose was and whatnot. So Acts 46 and 210, which I'm not going to delve into today, but they had provided opportunities for the state to expand early learning opportunities focusing on 3- and 4-year-olds. And we definitely recognize that in order to successfully implement the provisions of the Act, we needed stakeholder engagement. That was paramount in order for us to be able to implement things successfully within the benchmarks and the timelines and based on what's required in the Act. So I do want to say that we are grateful for the folks that did participate in this first phase. It is the first phase of these stakeholder engagements. They will not be the last, absolutely. And I want to start by saying thank you to those that did participate. And for any of the folks that are on right now who have participated, we'll share back some of the major themes from the feedback and some of the next steps that we identified, but also wanting to solicit feedback on next steps as well from folks. So the purpose of these stakeholder engagements in the first phase was really to focus on childcare programs that were going to be directly impacted by some of the key provisions, so including center-based family child care and Head Start programs. We partnered with the Department of Human Services to host these engagement sessions. And really, this is the start of soliciting regular, meaningful community input and engagement so that we can have long-term success, because we know this is going to be a long process. We've got 10 years to meet the benchmarks, and even after that, I'm sure there'll be more priorities that we'll have to implement and still continue to work. So this is just the beginning. We're not at all anywhere near the end. And so we're thankful for those that are willing to continue this process with us. Our main goals for this set of stakeholder engagements were to, one, share important information with stakeholders about the provisions in the Act to increase their knowledge about the Act itself, and then particularly the pieces that are going to have a direct impact on their programs. We also wanted to solicit feedback on the supports that they need for implementation purposes. We also wanted to, and I want to call this out specifically, we also wanted to understand better the concerns or any unintended consequences that folks want us to be mindful of, especially as implementation agencies. And then we also wanted to identify key partners and action items that will help us to attain the goals in some of the provisions in the Acts. And then finally, and most importantly probably, is to funnel feedback from these sessions to partners. So that includes other public implementing organizations, to the ELB, data and workforce groups, legislators, for example. So we do actually want to take this feedback and strategize on how we can go ahead and share this information and use it in some of our decision-making processes as we move forward. I also want to briefly just explain the layout of the engagements. So it was a 2-part session. So the first half of each session was an information sharing session. So we had a PowerPoint presentation where we presented the most current up-to-date information on the Act. So it incorporated all of the amendments that have been made every year since Act 46 first was enacted in 2020. So the PowerPoint slide did include, it does have the most current information. So if anyone would like access to it, we are happy to share it. We do also have a flyer so the PowerPoint is much more tailored to the provisions that pertain to childcare programs. The flyer has a little bit more comprehensive information about some of the other pieces of the Act because the Act is really large. So just know that if you do want it, we can give it to you, but there is a little bit of a difference in the PowerPoint and the flyer. And then the second half was information gathering. So this is where we had asked some key questions, and I'll just briefly go through that. Oh, actually, no, I'll go through that. Okay. So we asked some key questions and then solicited feedback from folks via a Jamboard. All of our sessions were hosted virtually, so we still have all of that information shared. And then what we did internally was extract some of the feedback and common themes that were generated from the sessions. We did ask participants that although there might have been a post-it note already stuck on a Jamboard, to please still place that feedback up, because counting how often something came up was still important to us. So we did want to make sure that we were also factoring in how often something came up. So even if someone already said something someone already was thinking, we still encourage folks to still put that up there so that we could factor that into our analysis as well. Okay, so I'm going to pass on to Alohi to go back to the next one, first page, please, to talk a little bit about the participants and attendance.
Thanks, Julina. So just to understand who participated in our engagements, in the 6 engagements that we were able to host in the last 3 months, we had about 100 participants that were registered. And of those that registered, 71% of them were able to attend one of the sessions. Looking at who by setting, we had about 87 that were from the center-based programs, 5 of those from Hawaiian language medium, Head Start, and 7 from Head Start. And then looking at the other side, family childcare, we had about 20 folks. We look at the number of programs that we reached out to by island. Of course, Oahu is always a large number, but at 64, but we did get representation from Hawaii Island, Maui County, and Kauai. We also asked our participants, no matter if they attended or not, if they found resources in the session valuable. So over 81% of those that were able to respond to the post survey found their session and the resources very valuable, or at least somewhat valuable. And that's it for our participants. Yeah.
So the questions we honed in on included, so to set the context, we started off with, as we begin to expand early learning options for 3 and 4-year-olds, what excites folks and what concerns do they have? Then we asked if anyone had, and if so, how do they see themselves participating in expansion efforts? And if so, what support do they need? We also wanted folks to indicate if they had no interest at all in expanding. That was important information for us as well. We also honed in on accreditation, since that is a huge provision of the Act for many childcare programs. So what supports do they need pertaining to either achieving or sustaining accreditation? And then also, how might we better involve them and other stakeholders throughout this process? And then the final question was just a general parking lot on whether they had any other questions or ideas or suggestions about the Act. Okay.
I have a question. Sorry. Yes. These participants, you have the bar graph and you have these bubble numbers. How does it add up?
How does it
add up? What is the number total? Is it 107? Or is this percentage? Then it doesn't become 100%. But if I add those.
Kevin, can you scroll up?
Oh my God. Yeah.
Oh, because 107 is participants registered, not necessarily participants in attendance.
So if it's a 71%, maybe 70 or 80 participants, right? So what are these numbers?
Those are of those who registered.
but it's more than 107.
Some of them were doubled up.
Yeah,
Some
of
are
the-
doubled up.
Yeah, so the Hawaiian language, if you explain this, the Hawaiian language medium, the Head Start is included with the 87. So it should be 87 plus the family childcare. Is that 107?
I'm not sure, but it's okay.
Yeah.
Just-
Yeah.
These two are included
Oh, okay, okay, I understand now. I
Yeah.
understand.
because they're separate.
How about here?
This is also-
So that
So it
becomes
could be the
107.
same.
I'm sorry.
So 87 plus 20 is 107.
Yes.
Yes, that's fine. How about the bubbles?
Because I think that was for sites that were represented, so like Akapuna and Vale is on every island, so even though we had one
Oh, okay, okay,
representative.
okay, now I understand. Thank you.
Okay, got it, got your question.
Yeah, those are good programs.
Good question, thank you. Okay, any more questions about participation? Okay, so I'm gonna move on to the major themes. So as I mentioned earlier, internally, we analyzed all of the JAM board recommendations and notes we took, the recordings and whatnot, and extracted from there major themes that we kept getting consistently, pretty much across the board. I don't think any of these are gonna be a surprise to anyone, but I'm gonna point out, summarize, and then share a few quotes, direct quotes. So first, and probably most prominently, was supporting the early learning workforce. So many providers and programs did express having a concern to expand slots, or were excited about the opportunity to do so. I think folks are really invested in making sure that more families have options. And I think collectively as a field, we are aware that we know that we need to increase the supply to meet families' needs. However, at multiple sessions across a lot of settings, workforce was one of the biggest barriers. So many providers indicated that they already have difficulty with staffing shortages, with issues with recruitment and retention. Facilities is also a big barrier that was brought up, but for a few programs that said they did have capacity and facility space to expand, they didn't have the workforce to be able to actually accept more children. So even for those that had the capacity, workforce was still a really big barrier. In addition, increasing wages and compensation for staff came up consistently as a really important support. And then just continually notating that recruitment and retention of qualified staff continues to plague many programs. So I do want to share a few specific quotes. So the first, how do we staff new rooms if we can't even staff the ones we currently have? Another comment, a big part of expansion is making sure workforce compensation efforts to support both private and public sector are being addressed. And the last one, we have a desire to expand. However, the challenge continues to be finding qualified staff. Okay, the next major theme, we titled this Supplementing, Not Supplanting, because we felt that was basically the essence of the feedback. So a lot of participants across the board expressed concerns about the potential detrimental impacts of expansion, and many of them honed in particularly on public expansion and how that might have detrimental impacts to the private sector, including particularly to smaller programs and infant toddler programs. There were many suggestions of support, including financial support to bolster existing programs, providing funding for both private and public sector programs, and then making sure that expansion plans take into consideration how building spaces may impact enrollment of other existing programs that might be nearby or in the same community. So another set of few quotes. So one, a concern would be how expansion might impact enrollment of existing programs. Another one, would like planning to be collaborative, consulting with programs to ensure locations of expansion are not competing with other programs. And then this third one, I'm gonna sum it up. It was something that came up from a couple of providers. These providers did have both an infant toddler center and preschool programs. So they really honed in on how this might also be detrimentally impactful to infant toddler programs. So they explained that If expansion that's focusing on 3 and 4-year-olds happen nearby, it might end up decreasing enrollment in their preschool program. Because these programs often use surplus amounts of money they might get from the preschool side to help offset the losses that they experience on the infant toddler center side, if the enrollment is impacted on the preschool side and decreases the funding, they will not be able to supplement and support the infant toddler center. So they may have to close the infant toddler center or both that and the preschool. And then some Hawaiian medium education programs did say that if there were detrimental impacts to the preschool program, then there would really be no point to have the Hipepe program, which services the infants and toddlers as sort of that feeder up to Hawaiian medium preschool programs. Okay. And then accreditation was a big one, in part because we did specifically ask for it, but I do think it was a very big concern for many providers. Mostly because many programs, including those that have been accredited for many years now and probably would be considered accreditation experts, express that it's a very labor-intensive process. It's a long time to get done. It's a lot of funding to get done, a lot of funding to sustain. A lot of programs are dealing with staffing shortages. So a lot of directors also express some concerns with their own capacity to be able to, I mean, I think everyone here has heard it, right? Whenever they go through accreditation, it's a very crazy, difficult time. And if they have to deal with staffing shortages in addition to, it becomes a really complicated process to achieve and accomplish. So the most common suggestions were to provide some guidance on the process to become accredited or to sustain accreditation, as well as pretty much mostly just funding. So funding to help actually pay for and offset some of the costs that is incurred with accreditation. I do also want to point out that there were some requests for clarification on the class, particularly what does it mean? Ben, can you help me out with the language?
Oh, just a classroom assessment scoring system measures teacher-child interactions.
Yeah, and there's, yeah, what is a what it means to have a satisfactory class.
Oh, boy, that's it's up for debate, I want to say, because Head Start has their thresholds that they believe for each of the 3 domains. What is the minimum thresholds, and then they have quality thresholds that kind of move around and whatnot. So I think off the top of my head, putting me on the spot, but the thresholds are 4, 3, and 2. Instructional support is a 2, 3 is classroom management, I think, and then yes, emotional support is the highest at 4. Those are like minimum thresholds. So
yes, so I think a lot of the feedback we got from all the Head Start programs were to provide that clarification on what does the act mean when we say satisfactory. Okay, and then another big, I do want to call out the feedback we got from HME, the Hawaiian Medium Education Programs. So when meeting with them, you know, they explained that a lot of HME programs pointed out that HME was established for language revitalization. So some of the feedback was to accept WinHEC as an accreditation body that can be eligible to still receive POD funds, or to just exempt HME programs completely from that provision. And then related, the 4th bullet point that we called out was to provide distinctive support for HME. So again, because HME programs were established for language revitalization, some of the current efforts that are underway might contradict the efforts of HME. And really, ultimately, if we put HME programs in jeopardy, then we are really jeopardizing Hawaiian language revitalization efforts as a whole. And I also wanted to call out that, because I do think this is something we hear often from English language programs and providers and external resources, but HME programs don't have curriculum or evaluations that can be resourced from external resources, or it's not as simple as just translating whatever from English to Olelo Hawaii, right? So there's a lot of additional support needed that needs to be really distinctive for HME. And then finally, also came up
quite often, was to keep folks involved. What we really heard from providers was they want to be kept in the loop. They want to be part of the decision-making process. They want to know about updates and progress. They want to know how they can help and whatnot. So we definitely want to consider that in our feedback to think about how we can continue to involve folks, including those that have already provided feedback. So how can we continue keeping them in the loop? How can we continue involving other stakeholders that we haven't yet met with and whatnot? Okay, so Kevin, can you move to the second page? So we do have some next steps. So again, this first iteration focused on childcare providers, specifically home and center-based and Head Start programs and HME, since we felt that a lot of the provisions in the bill that are happening soon were really focused on them. But we do want to reach out next to FCIL programs and other early learning programs that we know are part of the field. And we do eventually want to reach out to parents. We've got that feedback as well, something that we know is super important, but we also know that there are existing entities that are trying to sort of coordinate family engagement efforts or to start some type of initiative. Our office is also really committed to making sure that we can incentivize family feedback. We don't want to continue to ask parents to provide feedback without actually providing any incentive. Because we know that we continue to reach out to families and it takes time. I don't mind asking you all for your time since you all get paid to be here, but that's not the same for many of our families, right? So I think that process we need to think through a lot more. There's a lot more resources I think we need to figure out how to get. But so those are some of our immediate next steps. And then for today, well, not for today, but this second page, what we would really appreciate, or ask for today, I should say, we do have a few questions that we would love for board members to think about and send to us on how you folks think we might be able to support some of the next steps, or what you think some of our next steps should be. Like, what should ELB and DHS consider as we start to move through this process and continue stakeholder engagements? Super simple, easy questions. If you want to print it out, it's the second page on the flyer that was handed out or will be emailed to you. And then I have my email address on it, so you can just send it to me in an email. But it would be really helpful and great if you folks could share any thoughts that you have for us to consider as we move forward through this. Any questions?
Board members have an opportunity to ask questions or make comments about the EOEL engagement sessions with the providers. Any questions?
Because Megan has raised her hand.
Hi, everybody. Yeah, it's not really a question, just a comment here. And thank you to the staff for doing these engagement sessions. I think no matter what environment we work in, we found them helpful. The discussions were very interesting. And going back to your, I think, initial slide, I just wanted to provide, I guess, private providers' perspective on some of the issue of enrolling students. And right now there is definitely a workforce issue. We're definitely lacking staff, which would enable us to take more students. But in addition to that, I think we'd like to work with the state to the extent possible on enrolling more students in all types of educational settings, because I don't know if it's a symptom of the pandemic that we're still kind of struggling to get through or not, but I think all of us across the board are seeing about 65% of our usual enrollment or our license capacity. And I believe you had mentioned that the public pre-K was also experiencing lower than normal enrollments. So I just find that to be a really interesting data point for everybody to consider. And how might we work together to sort of work together to enroll students, basically to address these issues? Because for Siegel's part, and I'll just share, I think some of the subsidies that are available right now to students would almost cover their monthly tuition entirely. And we know that's a big factor for most families. About 20% of our families rather on some kind of subsidy or scholarship. So we know that's important. So just really food for thought. Thank you.
Thank you, Megan. Anyone else? I don't see anybody else in the chat, and no hands, additional hands. Yeah.
Thank you.
Well, thank you very much for bringing us up to date on the information, which was earlier shared with the Strategic Implementation Subcommittee during its meeting today. And it's a nice segue into the next section of our meeting, which is an update from the subcommittee and Lane on the process of the roadmap and the status, where things stand and where we're headed. So then, and Lane, I'm going to turn it over to the two of you.
Thanks, Bob. Yeah, it was kind of nice segue. Megan is in our subcommittee, but we didn't plant her to talk about and ask those questions. But it is a nice segue because some of the things that Megan talked about, our comments, was things that we addressed today. We had a half-a-day meeting with our subcommittee, and we had a very productive meeting, I want to say. We talked about, we want to lay some foundational work. So we did come to terms, come to an agreement around values of the roadmap and what are we trying to do and why, and we want to reach that 100% mark and how do we get there. So we talked about what are some of the common values we want to take into consideration, some guiding principles that we want to take into consideration as we develop the roadmap. Then we narrowed down like how many kids are we talking about, because that was very important to our conversation to figure out, okay, are we talking 5,000 kids or are we talking 10,000 kids? And so we were able to look through some data to really carve out like this is the amount of kids that what it means to be at 50% and what it means to be at 100%. And then, as Bob said, Jordana and Alohi did share the same information you guys just received from them about the shareholder, stakeholder meetings, engagement meetings, which was very helpful for our group to start the process. And what we did kind of later in the meeting today was really talk about the challenges in the 4 destinations that I brought up several meetings ago, but we really carved out 4 destinations for the roadmap. One is around workforce, obviously. The other is around facilities. And then we have the third is quality. And the last one is funding around a mixed delivery system. And so we spent the second part of the meeting really talking about the challenges in all of those, in getting to those different destinations, and also some of the strategies that we want to look into to put into the roadmap to inform legislators. These are the things that need to happen in order for us to get to that 100% mark. So a lot of different ideas came out, a lot of different things came out that are either supporting existing efforts or even legislative efforts that we feel like needs to be in place, or some policies that we need to look at. So the current status is we just had our, like I said, we just had our meeting today. We threw a lot of information out. Lane's gonna digest that, put his magic touch on it, and come up with a first draft for our subcommittee to look at. We're targeting October 25th, I believe, is when we're gonna meet again as a subcommittee, really to kind of carve out that first draft and have it prepared for everyone at the November 10th Early Learning Board meeting. So that'll be our first roadmap, our first draft of our roadmap that we're going to share with Early Learning Board. I did want to thank Keiko, because Keiko was our facilitator and did a great job of organizing us and getting us thinking and helping us stay on track. We often get off track because there's so much moving parts to the roadmap. So I wanted to thank Keiko. I don't know, Lane, if you have anything you want to add, or even anybody else?
No, just to reiterate what Ben said, I think the commitment is to provide the board with a draft for them to review ahead of time. So maybe just, I don't want to say just prior to the meeting, but in advance of the November 10th meeting for next month, the board will have an opportunity to review whatever comes out of the drafting process for them to review, and then I guess there will be a process or a discussion of what you see, what your comments are, and then there'll be an attempt to try to work through that with a final approval from the board in the December meeting, because the report is due 20 days prior to the legislature, which is going to open been, I believe, on the 18th of January, but 10 days before, we'll put it like right after Christmas. So there won't be time for another board meeting before the due date for the report. So December is the last chance. So there's a commitment to have the draft available for the board to review, and final approval will come in the December meeting.
I want to add one thing. I want to be sure that everyone understands. This subcommittee has been meeting every other week for a few months now. This is not just the first effort. So that today's effort really was a collective. We've done all this work. Now what does it mean and how do we shape it so that Wayne can take it away and craft a document for us to look at? I want to add my thanks to Ben, to all the members of the subcommittee who gave up their morning and had spent a lot of time researching information, bringing it back to the board, having serious conversation, and functioning as this board needs to, representing the voices of their constituent group while working together to arrive at a shared document at the end that we can bring forward. So it was exciting to see the progress we made today. I think it relieves some of the frustration we've been feeling about, are we ever going to get there? And there is an end in sight for this process. And thank you to everyone and to Ben for taking on the leadership and for Lane taking on the crafting role. We really appreciate that. Before we move on to the next item on the agenda, are there any comments or questions regarding the roadmap that members have? All right, hearing none, we will move to item number 7. We have one subcommittee report to share with you today. Matt Chim is, as the chair of the Governance Standing Subcommittee, has asked if I would share the highlights of our September meeting, knowing that we have another one coming up shortly. There were 2 primary items on that agenda. One was to take a look at the Executive Office and Early Learning Directory evaluation process and the content of that process, based upon the fact that Yuko has just moved into the position, and we are trying to design a process that will be suitable for somebody who is orienting to a new position while holding the standards of leadership. And we are going to continue to take a look at that to come up with a document. Hopefully that will be useful and helpful to all of us and to support goal setting for Yuko for the year coming forward as well. So that's still in process and that discussion will continue. The other major item was to take a look at the Senate concurrent resolution about the Early Learning Board governance process. The subcommittee took a look at some of the information that was brought back from our last board meeting, which was its first discussion around this particular topic, and determined that some fundamental information was needed about how the decisions were initially made to create the membership on the board as a representative board, to take a look at not only its structure and its composition, but also its size, to look at term limits and to make some determination about the permanent seats that currently exist on the board, how they were arrived at. And because even though I have been around as long as all of this is happening, I was not sitting at the table when those decisions were made, and we went to the 2 sources, Roy Takumi, Legislator Takumi, who was the chair of the House Education Committee, and Jill Takuda, who was the chair of the Senate Committee at those particular times. We have heard back from Roy with some very interesting observations that the subcommittee will share, and we'll bring some of them back with you. Jill had been out of town and is a tad busy these days, as you might expect. We are hoping still to hear back from her, and a special meeting will be conducted by the subcommittee to really dive in to bring back information to the board for further discussion. The next official meeting is October 28th, and we anticipate a meeting prior to that with regard addressing the information we received in those two members. So that's Matt's report to the board for this meeting. So now that work continues on the report, it is going to be a complex conversation, and I'm not even sure we will have it resolved in time for the legislative session to begin. But we will have a report for them by that time. The next item, Jordana, would you share the screen? I wanted to create a draft and a straw man of sorts of a framework for policies that might inform the advocacy that we do during this particular session of the legislature coming up. And this is really literally just throwing it out there for you to begin to think about. And we will continue to have more discussion around it, but to get the juices going so that by the time we hit the legislative session, we have our policy priorities before us. And these are fairly global, and they are intentionally global, so that once they are approved by the board, we would be able to supply testimony based upon the board's support around these advocacy policies. And it would guide us in which bills should we be supporting, because oftentimes there isn't time between meetings for us to get together and really have some extended conversation about what the testimony should look like, but whether we should be supporting it. So let me walk you through these. If you have any comments you want to make at this point or questions about them, please share them. But know that we're going to come back to them as well. And I will eventually send them out to you. Well, actually before the next board meeting, I will send them to everybody to consider. But I wanted to try these out at this point with everyone. They're all built around the building blocks of the state plan, since that's really what's guiding the direction of the work we're going. Alohi, they do support most of the strategic implementation plan, but perhaps not as totally or as specifically as they do in that case. So if you bear with me, we can walk through them. First of all, building block 1 in the state plan is around the issues of health, safety, and well-being. These are the two areas I'm suggesting we consider supporting. Bills that support children and family health and safety provisions around issues of behavioral health, mental health, and physical health. Bills that promote equitable access to health care for families within their own communities. But those would be two primary guidelines for advocacy in this area. With regard to building block 2, which is around family partnerships, that we would support bills that will increase family engagement opportunities. And we would also support bills that strengthen family understanding of child development and parenting. Around building block 3, can you raise this one a little bit, Jordana, please? Around early learning, there are 4 categories. 1, to expand access and opportunity to quality early learning and care, including infant and toddlers in both the public and the private sectors. Obviously, that one relates to Act 46 and the efforts there, and those kinds of bills that will support that. We would support bills that promote stabilizing and sustaining current options and access to early care and learning. Bills that provide child care financial assistance for families and providers. And bills that maximize use of current funding to support developmentally appropriate sites, especially in underserved communities. In building block 4 around the workforce, this is obviously a huge one. When we get the RAND report, we may add more to this, but to build workforce capacity. So looking at building a pipeline, career pathway consideration, things of that nature, as well as any plans that we might build on that are currently in operation and then builds that support, retention, and recruitment. Obviously, looking at issues around compensation, stipends, and the subsidy pilot that DHS particularly supported last year. And finally, building block 5 on coordinating the system, bills that increase infrastructure for data collection, sharing, and analysis. That could be funding bills, that could be support of collaboration, that could be ways of using types of data that might be collected. So those are the basic overriding global types of policy statements that I'm suggesting we consider. If anybody has any comments or observations at this point, please do share them. If not, you can let them percolate and we can come back around to them. There may be some that are missing, there may be some that you feel need more elaboration. So please know that this is an attempt to gather a beginning look at those particular items. So Justina, I see you have a question.
It was for the last agenda item, so I'll just yield.
Carrie has her hand up.
Sorry,
Carrie.
Carrie?
Hey, Bob, thank you for this. This is really helpful. I would make a suggestion for building block 1 to name intimate partner violence and child abuse and neglect and substance use, and name it instead of just have a global physical health. We've been told that many times by partners, and we know how critically important that is for healthy early development.
Did you put that in the chat? Can you put it in the chat?
Sure.
So that we have the language. All right. Anyway, Justina, did you, I'm sorry, I didn't really hear what you said. Did you not decide to have a question?
Sorry, my question, I just wasn't a fast typer enough. I so wrote, I have a question, but it was for your, it was for the governance, or sorry, it was for your roadmap update. So we're past that now.
But you can ask it. Go ahead. I don't mind. I'm sorry, we didn't capture it then. I didn't see it.
So it's for Ben, if you don't mind, if he answers it, because the one so there's the 4 destinations you mentioned, Ben, and the one I wasn't as clear on was the last one about funding for a mixed delivery system as a, I think you were calling them the destinations. So just wanted to hear a little bit like what would you be looking at in that item?
Yeah, it's just looking at the cost for a mixed delivery system. What kind of funding sources are there existing, or are there any possible ways of generating more funding? I want to say. So we don't have too specific, well, we have some specific strategies, but we're still carving them out. But it was really looking at public-private options, looking at POD, subsidies and whatnot, those kind of things. So that's what we're talking about, yeah.
Okay, thank you. Thanks for letting us go back to agenda items, Bob.
I'm sorry we missed it initially, but we have time for questions always. All right. Anyone else have anything they want to add to the or comment about with regard to the legislative session policy draft potential?
I have a comment.
Sure.
I don't know where it would be appropriate, but I was wondering if it would be too much to ask if we consider when we're looking at different legislation that we might support, that we always have a lens in there for Hawaiian medium and how that might impact. Because I think like the KEA is a great example of something that, yes, I think, overall it's something that can be widely supported, but I think we always need to be kind of a possibility for a certain different lens when we're talking about how it's going to impact Hawaiian medium. So I was just wondering if there's space for that, or if it should just be that old.
Yeah, and I think that's partially your role on the board too, quite frankly, is to keep us attuned to that. It doesn't mean the board's going to always agree. the board can say, yes, we recognize that, but for this reason, we're going to move forward. But yeah, I think that should always be one that we consider. Okay. Any other comments or questions? All right, please keep these in mind. Know that I want to come back around to them.
I think Erin has a comment.
Okay, Erin.
Hello. Thank you for catching that over there. I don't think I saw one up there related to prenatal bills, and I do want to ensure that we have some kind of a focus on the prenatal arena in some way, if there's anything that we can do to support pregnant persons.
Okay. Would you craft something for us to consider to add?
Sure. And then I wanted to share that I was on a summit this morning from the Prenatal to 3 Policy Impact Center, and they have a roadmap for states. And this is, I apologize if you all are familiar with this already, but this was the first time I got a chance to see the state roadmaps for policy outcomes so anyhow, there is a state report for each state available. And so I think that is something that may align with some of the efforts that we're already doing. Actually, Senator Joy Benaventure was on there as a featured presenter, which I thought was amazing. They're very happy to share about the minimum wage law that was passed for us this past year. So that was a big success for the state of Hawaii for our prenatal to 3 population. So anyway, just thought I would add that piece in there in case that might be a resource for future consideration.
You have a link for that?
Yes, I do. I will stick that in the chat box.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Ann. All right, since I'm not doing a very good job keeping track of the chat, is there anything else that I've missed? Jordana, you're my boss on this one.
No, so Carrie added the language and Erin just sent the link.
Okay. Thank you all. All right. The next item on the agenda is an opportunity for public comment once again. Is there any public comment to come forward? I don't see any. Jordana, do you see any? Okay. Thank you. Then member updates.
Carrie raised her hand.
Okay.
Yeah, I wanted to share part of an early intervention update that the state of Hawaii was accepted into an intensive TA with 0 to 3 to integrate IECMH into Part C. And so we have MedQuest and policymakers and Aim High and Part C, and then 0 to 3 providing TA. So we're really excited about that opportunity. And we'll keep you all updated on progress. That's part of the IECBH plan that the board's familiar with. So it's really exciting. And then just to remind everybody that we have, so it is 10 years of EOEL and 10 years of ECAS. So we have a November 9th ECAS network 10-year celebration out at Ko'olau. The morning will be spent looking back on the last 10 years, and the afternoon will be spent in a facilitated conversation with engaged inquiry on the next 10 years and where do we see the priorities need to be. It should be really fun and engaging, lots of movement and great food. So hopefully you can all attend. I'll put the registration in the chat.
Thank you, Carrie. Any other member updates? I'm seeing none. Okay. I have my other set of eyes agreeing with me here at this particular point. All right, then we will review the meeting outcomes and then ask Carrie to share with us some words of wisdom before we leave for today. Today's meeting, the key outcomes that I pulled out are we know that the KEA decision has been made with regard to supporting the Johns Hopkins approach. It has application for the English language programs. There were issues raised about the Hawaiian immersion and Olelo Hawaii medium utility in the KEA document. We heard from the EOEL engagement of providers, and we have been offered their PowerPoint or their flyer if you wish to have it. That information can be secured by contacting Jordana. The Senate Concurrent Resolution 217, the roadmap for implementation of Act 26, the draft will be provided to the board before the November meeting for input at that meeting, and input will be considered and a revised draft will be brought back to the board for approval in December for its December meeting. By the way, that we're not going to be looking for wordsmithing during that draft approval, but just substantive comments to consider by the board. Some additions to the building block were suggested, along with considering the impact on the Hawaiian medium bills that we do support, and support for consideration of support for prenatal bills as well. We're asked to consider additions to the legislative policy draft, knowing that we will be asked to provide an approval for that draft prior to the legislative session. And then one final announcement, Carrie has extended an invitation to everyone for the November 9th ECAS 10-year anniversary, looking past and looking forward to the work that's being done. So those are the outcomes that I had for this meeting. Anyone have anything else that should be included? All right, before we close out, once again, I want to thank Seed for making the center available, and it's wonderful to see real people sitting in the room, both on the inner circle and the outer circle. It's really encouraging. Christina, thank you as always, our gracious host, and for the wonderful cookies. By the way, those of you who sign in remotely don't get to taste those cookies. On that note, Carrie, what are the good words that you're leaving us with today?
The cookies might just bring me over the mountain. So that's not the quote. So I just want to recognize how incredibly busy October is for everybody. And so it just is a friendly reminder from Anne of Green Gables. I'm so glad that I live in a world where there are Octobers.
Thank you all, and please take care. Look forward to seeing you next month. We appreciate the work that all of you do, not only on behalf of children, but in support of the efforts of this board and the EOEL. Mahalo nui.